On the morning of October 15th, Sarah Chen simply vanished. No goodbye, no note, no sign of struggle. The 34-year-old architect left her downtown apartment at 7:15 a.m. for her usual Tuesday commute to work, and was never seen again. The 34-year-old architect left her downtown apartment at 7:15 a.m. for her usual Tuesday commute to work, and was never seen again. 3 months of searching yielded nothing. No credit card activity, no phone pings, no body. Police called it one of the most baffling disappearances in the city's history. But what investigators discovered in that abandoned warehouse on the edge of town would rewrite everything they thought they knew about what happened that morning. Sarah moved through her Tuesday morning like a ghost haunting her own life. The alarm shrieked at 6:30. She had done this routine 1,247 times since moving into the Riverside apartments 5 years ago. Wake, shower, coffee, check email on her phone while brushing her teeth, a habit her mother constantly criticized. The October sun filtered weakly through her kitchen windows. She was thinking about the Mercer Building presentation, mentally rehearsing the pitch she'd give in 40 minutes. The coffee was cold. She didn't care. She drank it anyway. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked tired. 40 wasn't far off. When did that happen? When did the skin under her eyes become permanently shadowed? She applied concealer with precision, the same ritual she performed every morning, each stroke automatic. The text from Marcus arrived as she was grabbing her keys. Still can't make tonight. Sorry, big deal at work. She read it twice, didn't respond. There was nothing new to say. Their relationship had become a series of apologies and postponements, and she was too tired to argue about it. Not today. At 7:13, she locked her apartment door. The deadbolt clicked into place with a decisive sound. She had no idea it would be the last time she'd ever turn that key. The subway platform smelled like burnt rubber and someone's cheap cologne. Sarah wedged herself into the familiar corner, the spot where she always stood. To her left, a businessman aggressively tapped his phone. To her right, a teenage girl with purple headphones stared into space. The train arrived with its familiar screech. The doors opened. People poured in like they were filling a container to capacity. Sarah moved with them, muscle memory finding her usual position by the middle door. She noticed him then. A man in a grey hoodie, face obscured, standing closer than necessary. She shifted slightly. He didn't move. She told herself not to be paranoid. This was rush hour. Everyone stood too close. The train lurched forward. She grabbed the pole to steady herself. The man's hand was suddenly near hers on the same pole. She looked up, and for just a moment, she saw his eyes. Dark, focused, fixed on her, with an intensity that made her stomach clench. Then the crowd shifted, and he was gone, swallowed by the sea of morning commuters. She told herself she was being ridiculous. This was the city. This was Tuesday. This was normal. The train pulled into the Civic Center station at 7:47. She exited with the tide of bodies, moved up the stairs, emerged into the weak morning light. The office building was 3 blocks away. She'd walked this route approximately 1,300 times. She never made it to the building. By 9 a.m., people started to notice. Sarah had never missed a meeting. Not once in 8 years. Her assistant, Derek, called her cell. It went straight to voicemail. He called again at 9:15, again at 9:30, at 9:45. Derek walked to her empty office and found her computer still off, her chair pushed in neatly, her coffee mug from home sitting on the edge of her desk like she'd stepped out and would return any moment. The Mercer Building presentation was supposed to start at 10 a.m. Richard Hartley, her supervisor, gave her 5 more minutes, then 10. Then he made the decision to begin without her. Halfway through the presentation, a presentation Sarah had worked on for 3 weeks, Richard's phone buzzed. It was security. Sarah's husband was downstairs. Her husband, not her boyfriend. That detail would become important later. Richard excused himself and found Marcus Chen in the lobby, not looking like a man in crisis, but looking confused. "I'm trying to find my wife. She left for work this morning and she's not here. She's not answering her phone." That's when security checked the building's entrance logs. Sarah Chen had never swiped her keycard that morning. She had never entered the building. The police arrived at 11:30 a.m. Detective Maria Vasquez had worked 23 missing persons cases. Only 2 had ended with the person found alive. She didn't tell Marcus that statistic. The timeline was impossible to crack. Sarah had been on the subway. 2 transit workers confirmed they'd seen her in the security footage. That distinctive grey coat, her dark hair pulled back, but then nothing. She exited at Civic Center at 7:47 a.m. She never arrived at work, never took a taxi, never used any form of transport. It was as if she'd simply ceased to exist the moment her foot left the subway platform. Her phone was found 3 days later, in a dumpster behind a closed restaurant on 7th Avenue. It was powered off, waterlogged. The SIM card was missing. No fingerprints but hers. The apartment search revealed nothing unusual. Bills were paid. Her calendar showed nothing suspicious. She kept a journal, but the entries were mundane. Complaints about work, notes about projects, the occasional line about Marcus he forgot dinner again. "I'm tired of trying." Nothing that suggested she was planning to disappear. Marcus claimed he knew nothing. They were happy, he insisted. Not perfectly happy, but happy. Yes, they'd been arguing. Normal couple stuff. No, she'd never mentioned leaving. No, she had no depression, no debts, no secret life. But here's what made Vasquez suspicious. Marcus's alibi was weak. He claimed to have been at the office when Sarah disappeared, but his co-workers said he'd been in meetings all morning, and his badge access showed he hadn't entered the building until 7:42 a.m., the same time Sarah was exiting the subway. He could have been on that train with her, but he could also have not been. By day 30 of the search, Sarah's face was on the local news and posted throughout the city. By day 60, the media had moved on to other stories. By day 90, even the police had quietly closed the active investigation. Marcus gave an interview to the newspaper. He seemed appropriately devastated. He hired a private investigator. He appeared genuine, and yet something about him bothered Vasquez, a feeling she couldn't quite articulate. It was a homeless man named Robert who found the warehouse. He'd been sleeping in abandoned buildings for 6 years, ever since his wife left him, and he'd learned to avoid places that felt wrong. But this warehouse, on the eastern edge of the industrial district, had felt empty, safe, free, until he found the backpack. It was hidden behind a stack of old wooden pallets, shoved into the dark corner of what used to be an office. Grey, expensive, the kind of backpack a professional might carry. Inside, he found her wallet. Sarah Chen's ID stared up at him with unsmiling formality. He found her phone charger, a paperback novel, a hair tie, lip balm, the everyday items of an everyday life. And underneath it all, he found the journal. He didn't recognize the name Sarah Chen when he called the police, but he knew enough to understand that finding someone's backpack in an abandoned warehouse couldn't mean anything good. He waited for the police with the backpack clutched in his weathered hands, feeling like he'd discovered something terrible. Detective Vasquez arrived at the warehouse at 11 a.m. on January 16th. Her heart was hammering. After 3 months of nothing, suddenly everything. The warehouse was massive and decrepit, its interior a maze of forgotten machinery and dust. But what Vasquez found was more disturbing than the backpack. In what used to be a manager's office, there were photographs taped to the walls, dozens of them. Sarah leaving her apartment, Sarah on the subway, Sarah at her desk, Sarah at a coffee shop on a weekend, Sarah outside her gym, Sarah. Every moment of her life documented and preserved on a warehouse wall. But that wasn't the most shocking part. There were photographs of other women too, at least 18 of them. Different ages, different ethnicities, but all displaying the same professional headshot quality. All with names written carefully below in marker, all with dates beside the names. The journal was Sarah's, but the handwriting on most of the pages wasn't. The first 20 pages were definitely Sarah's, her precise, careful handwriting. Journal entries going back 2 years, normal things, work frustrations, relationship concerns, dreams about taking a sabbatical to travel. In late August, the entries changed tone. They became fragmented, confused. I keep seeing someone. A man on the subway. Always the same time. Always watching. Am I being paranoid? Marcus says I'm being paranoid. Saw him again today. Different route home. Same man. Is that possible? Found a note in my bag. No message. Just a photograph of me sleeping. How did he get this? Marcus doesn't believe me. Called police. They said there wasn't enough to investigate. Not enough to warrant anything. I feel like I'm going insane. Then, on September 2nd, the handwriting changed. It became loose, less controlled. The handwriting of someone else entirely. Sarah's entries stopped. Someone else's began. These entries were clinical, detailed. They read like a hunter's log. Subject 7, Sarah C., is particularly interesting. Living alone, husband, traveling frequently. walks predictable routes, anxious, hyper-aware. This makes her ideal. I've been establishing dominance for 3 weeks. She doesn't understand yet that she's already caught. The entries detailed Sarah's routine with sickening precision. Times she left work, the names of her friends, her favorite coffee shop, Marcus's work schedule. It was all there, documented like he was writing a dissertation on her life. Then came the final entries, written in increasingly erratic handwriting. Subject 7 is not cooperating. She's strong-willed, stubborn. This is making things difficult. I didn't want it to end this way, but she keeps fighting. She keeps trying to escape. I don't know what to do with her. She was supposed to be like the others. She was supposed to understand. The final entry was dated October 15th, the day Sarah disappeared. Subject 7 is gone now. I had to make a choice. I chose to let her go. She chose to resist. There are consequences for resistance. She will not be found. She will become a memory. She will be forgotten, like the others should have been. But they won't forget her. None of them ever forget. That is my curse. To create ghosts that no one else can see. The warrant was issued within hours. Police descended on Marcus Chun's office building and found him attempting to leave the parking garage. He ran. He actually ran. Surprising for a man who'd been so composed during the investigation. They found him hiding in a bathroom stall in the basement of a building 2 blocks away. The handwriting in the journal matched Marcus's. Forensics confirmed it. The photographs taped to the warehouse walls. Marcus had taken them. The backpack belonged to the previous subject, a woman named Jennifer Morse, who had disappeared 7 years ago and had never been found. When they searched Marcus's apartment, Sarah's apartment, they found more photographs, more journals, more evidence. He'd been meticulous in his documentation, creating a detailed chronicle of his obsessions spanning more than a decade. There were 18 women whose names appeared in the journals. 18. But Marcus had a particular system. He would fixate on a woman for a period of weeks or months, documenting her life in minute detail. He called this the observation phase. Then he would begin the approach phase, slowly letting them know they were being watched, leaving subtle hints, testing their responses. Most of them, he documented, surrendered at this point. They became compliant. But Sarah hadn't. Sarah had fought back. The police found 17 bodies over the following weeks, buried in various locations across the state, all of them women whose disappearances had been documented in Marcus Chen's journals. They were able to identify most of them. Their families, at last, would be able to bury them, to grieve properly, to stop wondering. But Sarah Chen was never found. Marcus refused to speak about her. When interrogated, he claimed she was alive, that he'd let her go, that she was out there somewhere living a different life. The detectives believed he was lying, that he'd killed her like the others. But they couldn't find a body. They couldn't find a grave. They couldn't find anything except his insistence that she was alive. Years passed. Marcus was convicted of the murder of 17 women and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. But the Sarah Chen case remained officially unresolved. Not closed, but not actively pursued. A ghost case for a ghost victim. Detective Vasquez never quite let it go. She would sometimes drive past the warehouse, even after it had been demolished. She would think about the journal entries, about Marcus's claim that Sarah was alive, about the pattern of women he'd documented who had complied, surrendered, become his obsession. And she would wonder, is it possible he was telling the truth? The woman who called herself Alina Rodriguez lived a quiet life in a small apartment in Portland. She worked as a freelance translator, taking jobs remotely, never meeting clients in person. She didn't have friends. She didn't date. She didn't go out more than necessary. She had nightmares every night. In the nightmares, she was back in that warehouse. She was back in the darkness. She was back in his hands. But in the nightmares, she couldn't escape. In the nightmares, she became one of the 17. In waking life, she checked the news constantly, searching for updates on the Marcus Chen case. She read about the trial, the conviction, the victims. She saw her own photograph displayed in news articles. Missing. Sarah Chen. If you have any information, please call ... double quotes. Her mother had died 2 years after she disappeared, never knowing what happened to her daughter, never getting closure. Alina Sarah had thought about turning herself in, revealing that she was alive. But what good would it do? Marcus was in prison. His victims were finally at rest, and she spent 5 years rebuilding her life in fragmented pieces, learning how to exist without past, without connection, without the identity that had been so thoroughly documented and hunted. Sometimes, when she was feeling particularly broken, she would visit the Marcus Chen Wikipedia page. She would read the summary of his crimes, his conviction, his life sentence, and she would see, in the comments section, messages from people who had known her. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus, now remarried, her former supervisor retired, her sister estranged for years, now reaching out publicly for any information about what happened. None of them knew that she was alive, watching them from the digital shadows. She thought about them sometimes. She thought about the 17 women who weren't as lucky as her. She thought about how she'd fought when the others surrendered. She thought about the moment she managed to break free from her restraints in that warehouse, about the moment she realized the door wasn't locked, about the moment she ran into the darkness and didn't stop running. She'd run right out of her own life, and sometimes, on sleepless nights, Alina would wonder if that was worse than what the 17 women had experienced. Physical death was horrible, but what about psychological death? What about becoming a living ghost, unable to claim her own identity, unable to grieve her own family, unable to close the loop of her own story? The most shocking thing that investigators found wasn't the bodies or the journals or the photographs. It was this: even after escaping, even after being given a second chance at life, Sarah Chen couldn't bring herself to return to it. The version of Sarah Chen who had left her apartment on October 15th was dead. Killed not by Marcus's hands, but by his obsession, by his documentation, by his systematic theft of her privacy and autonomy. Alina Rodriguez lived on, but Sarah Chen remained disappeared. And in a prison cell, in a maximum security facility, Marcus Chen smiled when he read that Sarah's case was officially closed due to lack of evidence of a crime. She was alive, as he'd always insisted, out there somewhere, living a different life. He had one in the only way that mattered to him. He had successfully erased her, not from the world, but from herself. And that, perhaps, was the most shocking thing of all.